Welcome to episode 3 of Silent Stages. For those of you who are not familiar, this is a conversation or series of conversations that we're having with different folks from different sectors of the music industry to gain a better understanding of how the pandemic has affected these various sectors in the industry, how these people are adapting to these changes, and what they feel like is going to be the future of music, live music, down the road. Today, we have two awesome people. We've got a representative that has a record label here in Austin, Texas, called Keeled Scales. We've got Tony Presley. I believe he's got a little experience as an artist as well. And then we have Frenchie Smith, who we'll refer to as Frenchie for the rest of this discussion, because that's how he's known around town. Frenchie is known for being a guitar player and founder of band 16 Deluxe years ago. And he owns a recording studio here in Austin, Texas called The Bubble. Frenchie, if you want to kind of start off, and if there's a little bit more about yourself you want to tell us, a little background.
Oh, sure. Hello, everybody tuning in. It's a pleasure to share our narratives together and have like our own NPR version of "We Are Here." Yes, I'm Frenchie Smith. I'm a co-owner of a recording studio called The Bubble. And maybe this is a part in the video where it says Bubble Recording is .com is how you find us. But the studio itself has been going since 1998. So that at this point in 2021 is really old school. And my background comes from being in bands. I've seen 30 faces and rocked them all. Primarily, I played professionally in a band called 16 Deluxe, which is more of a kind of a noisier 90s style group. I'd say that if you distilled what we did, we were really fond of the bombast of the Flaming Lips in that era, and we're hopelessly influenced by them. The Pixies, the Breeders, and British groups like My Bloody Valentine. So it was punkish meets shoegaze, noise pop. And then once that group ran the course of its fate, collapsed, and we were meant to go in other directions. I played in a group with 16 Deluxe band member Stephen Hall, and we had a more of a hard rock band, kind of a cock rock band. I would say that was how it was referred to at the time. I don't know if that's appropriate to say anymore.
It's completely accurate.
Sometimes people call that stuff butt rock, but like AC/DC oriented, Def Leppard, MC5, like thrashy, garagey metal. That group was called Young Heart Attack. And then all the while, I was in these bands, and this kind of goes back many years. I was always interested in other groups, and I'll try to move kind of quickly here, but being in a band was certainly just everything to me. And I was really committed to it, no matter what a wreck of an individual I might have been in my 20s, as a lot of rockers experience. But I was always fascinated with the recording studio. And that era of recording studio was just had giant pieces of gear, giant tape machines, giant recording consoles. And so as my musician career was rising, and so few people remember those bands, and I'm really grateful for that. The recording studio, really, I just couldn't stop thinking about it, and how it affected songwriting, how just the sound of everything and recording technique. And so that led to an eventual reality that I would have a position in a recording studio that was cooperatively owned by my band, and then eventually go kind of separate ways. And the dream kind of changed, and I evolved out of being a live musician and a band member, and really just primarily producing. And so, but to have a recording studio that's gone since 1998, that technically makes the Bubble the second oldest continuously run studio in Austin, Texas.
Wow.
Nice.
And you know, we're, you know how they how everyone's has to be really hip to branding. These are kind of new concepts for me. I just always just kind of lived my day kind of by what I was inspired by, and the people that were around me, what music they made. I didn't really think about branding too much, but the more that the landscape of recording studios changes, I think what we're doing at the Bubble will be, it's our hopes, Alex and I, we kind of hope that we'll be on the kind of the head of the frontier of the new evolution of recording studios, because most of them will be very, very small and kind of bespoke, and maybe just some laptops and some very simple controllers, and people will make great recordings in those environments. However, we might just be the biggest, littlest studio. We might so the large commercial studios are going to have a harder time continuing to go, but recording spaces that can still record, up to 10 people playing live together at the same time. I mean, this is unheard of. And so the fact that we can capture those live performances and help people make recordings that, it's a little different from just doing it on a laptop where it's one person at a time recording. And then you go 5 steps down the line and you wonder why it doesn't sound as how the song feels when the group plays it. And of course, this is more of a live mentality and a kind of a group mentality, and it mirrors a lot of my history as a musician. I was always in a band. The recording studio was was a stage for us, not silent stage. It was a loud stage. So
Cool.
So I still like all that old school stuff where people play together and tons of hardware and big tube analog gear. It's I'm kind of like
That's
grandpa.
cool stuff. No, it's cool stuff. So Tony, if you want to give us a little bit of your background, and then kind of lead into what would be our next question is, like, at what point, or what was your realization of the pandemic, if it was a specific moment or if it happened over time, and what was your kind of like your first reaction, your gut reaction as to what was you in regards to your industry and what you were doing?
Yeah, sure. I just want to go back and talk about recording studios for a second, because I do seriously think that, like, studios like the Bubble, like, will always have a place. I mean, it's just a very different, the kind of folks that want to go in and track 10 instruments and get room sound and be able to do overdubs with that sort of quality. Like, you can't achieve that with a small setup in a small room with a few mics and a laptop. It's just a different, yeah. I would like to think that, like, studios that have a grand piano and have a big reverb chamber and have an analog tape machine are always going to be in demand. And I work with artists that do both, and you can never really invest investing good money in, like, a good album recording is almost always worth it. We put out a record earlier this year where it was, like, the first time we hired a producer, and we rented out a studio for a week and flew all the band members in and all that stuff. And, like, we're just, like, so happy to have that document. It was all recorded to tape, it's all recorded live, as like, everything was tracked live. We don't have you know, in talking to like sync people and licensing folks, you know, it's like, sorry, we don't have instrumentals. Like you know, there's vocal bleed on everything because the band tracked it live. And that's, yeah, I mean, like, there's always going to be a certain audience for that type of music and people that are going to appreciate those recordings. And so, yeah, that's like one thing that I feel like Austin has gotten right in terms of the music industry in Austin is we have a really healthy ecosystem of studios, at least from where I'm sitting. You know, I'm a little bit outside of that world, but it, you know, anytime a band moves to town and they ask me like, hey, do you know any good producers? Can you recommend a studio? And it's like, well, here's 5, you know, if these 5 don't suit your purposes, I have another 5 that I can recommend as well, you know? So
Yeah.
I don't think, you know, other cities can really boast the quality of studios that we have here. So yeah, anyway, that's my 2 cents about
Well,
the
and Tony, to interject, you know, it's like it's a trifecta before we get to that transference of entertaining, right? There's those brave humans that are okay, we're going to be a band. You're like, oh my God, high five. There you are. You're going to be in a band right now. I love you. Then there's the brave humans that are putting these records out and nurturing the bands to, you know, just trying to listen to where they're coming from and having the perfect balance of being hands-on and hands-off, and then, you know, the right kind of environment and recordist to bring it all together. But really, it's I'm really in awe of the people. It means so much to me when a label puts out a record I got to work on, when the bands started out just investing in themselves and all of a sudden the label gets interested and puts them out. It just like it's like any emotional pain I've ever felt in my life kind of just goes away for a brief period with that kind of vindication. So Tony, thanks for just being there and putting yourself into the making dreams come true. It's awesome. It means a lot to me.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, I mean, I think it's super validating for bands when a label kind of signs on and is willing to kind of invest their money into a project. And, you know, I think with Keeled Scales finally being at the point that we're at now, it's like there's a lot less financial risk involved for us, you know, here in like year 7 than there was like 4 or 5 years ago, where it was just a huge question mark. You know, we didn't know what we were doing. We didn't have distribution figured out. You know, I couldn't get people to like write me back, you know, like, hey, check out this new album, you know, much less like, please write about it, you know. So yeah, I think like now that the label is starting to become a little bit of a platform for artists, you know, it's a lot more exciting for us to kind of like do the things that we're good at and like, you know, take some chances on things that we really like and think will do well, and kind of see if we can convince other people that that's the case.
Yeah. If you want to touch base on, you know, kind of when the pandemic became a realization, and
there was this little like, you know, 8 or 9 day period where South by Southwest had officially canceled, and, you know, kind of Austin folks, like true to like their spirit, were like, nah, we can make this happen. We'll set up a bunch of unofficial day parties. We'll have a ton of hand sanitizer, and we'll just like clean the mics after every set, you know. And I just don't think it had really sunk in like what was happening in like Italy and, you know, and France and in Spain, and just sort of like what a global pandemic entails. And, you know, I think there was this day where I would say like, you know, 75% of the official or the unofficial day parties that were still planning to go ahead all sort of canceled at once. And, you know,
yeah,
we talked to, you know, all the booking agents that we work with and promoters that we work with. outside of Austin. And yeah, it was kind of just this one day that just every tour, every show, everything just got canceled all at once. And that was kind of when it sort of set in that like, hey, touring of any kind is probably not going to happen for, I think even back then we were pretty clueless as to the scale of this and how long it would last. And I know people back then they couldn't really imagine it going on for more than 3 or 4 months. I think people were like hoping, oh, okay, maybe some touring can come back in the summer or like fall 2020, and now it's like most of the agents that we work with are like, yeah, January 2022 feels like the most realistic time for any like substantial touring, where venues are going to be at a capacity that makes like financial sense for bands to tour.
Yeah, we spoke to a representative from the National Independent Venue Association, and he made a good point that all the cities have to be ready to go in order to book a successful tour. It's like, sure, Austin can have, venues ready to go, but if a band wants to trek across the country, they need to have those spots where they can make it all the way across in order to make money and make it successful. So
it's kind of a similar thing with the movie industry releasing a film and it going to theaters first. It's like, well, it's going to theaters in 20 cities, not every city that has a theater system, so that just kind of thinking about how, because I mean, the music industry is pretty tiny compared to the film industry. And just okay, it's like, okay, well, just seeing that every city's got different kind of levels of stage 3, 4, 5, and just people going into movie theaters right now is just common at all. And it's like, okay, cool. How do they release films now? Straight to iTunes? Weird,
Yeah.
Well, but the movie industry does have the advantage of that. They can release first run movies like Wonder Woman 84. They decided not to go to theaters and they just put it on HBO Max. And you can, it's not the same experience, but you can watch a movie on your home screen and it's all right. In the music industry, I mean, try as you might, and I know that a lot of groups have tried to do streaming shows and stuff. It's a pale comparison, unfortunately, with the live music experience, because you just really have to kind of be there. And so it just, music has it even, from my perspective as an outsider, an even tougher situation than the movie industry. It's just really sad. And as somebody who's, goes to a lot of shows as just a fan, it's a big loss to my life. And I can't imagine the loss to the people who actually, this is their occupation. But it's a funny thing is you Tony were talking about South by Southwest kind of being part of the moment, and we talked to Kevin Curtin from the Chronicle and Alex Moss from Black Angels, and both of them, that was the moment for them. It's like when they found out that South by Southwest canceled, it was, you could just see the weight of that, and it was like almost like losing a friend or something, as for these two Austin guys to know that wasn't going to be happening. That's just a big blow.
I don't really see how it comes back in full force next year. I'm curious to see how it comes back
in 22.
Yeah, I mean, I think the one that they're having this year, the sort of virtual one, is going to be a kind of a shadow of what it usually is.
Yeah, I think it's going to take a few years before we see it back to the big behemoth monster that it was in years past. As much as I disliked most of it, I want it back now.
Yeah.
Frenchie, as as having a studio and obviously health concerns, were there I'm sure there were a lot of adjustments that had to be made, but was there that much of a lapse in productivity and work throughout that course of the past year?
So it's so from cleaning to like UV laser beams and checking people's temperatures to and just the stuff that's always has been in my my nature with musicians for years. Well before we go into a session, we're always in touch with each other. There's not a single thing. There's not a single session I think I've ever done where I just showed up and I didn't know what was going on with anybody. So it's just been my style to be hands on, and so there's a lot of questionnaires, you know, and they're very organic the way we speak to each other. So before a group enters the building, like we're talking about it. Hey, what have you been doing? How are you? I mean, and that would be there independent of a virus, a pandemia. So and I'm also really fortunate that I just have kind of years of artists, just years and years and years that we've collaborated. So I wouldn't say that I've started a ton of new relationships with groups, but I've just I am what I am, and I'm kind of born to go make noise in a recording studio, and the musicians I work with, they are who they are. They're born to go make noise in a recording studio. So not a lot has dried up for us. It's just we just do it kind of smarter and more, cleaner, and probably a little more self-awareness, but that's also not a bad thing. So and I feel like I say this all the time, but when I'm in that recording environment, when I'm at the recording studio, and I feel this way, I feel that I've got my health. I'm standing on my own 2 feet in that moment, and I'm very grateful for that, and it's just such a gift to be able to be with people and make music. It's really, before it was awesome. Now it's like mega privilege. So I'm seeing and hearing people lay down performances that are like really top notch. So the human spirit will prevail, and luckily I've been producing for X amount of years. So there's just my relationships with people. I didn't just start out and then all of a sudden, the thing went kind of dry on me. It's also, frankly, it's been years since I've gone to nightclubs to look for bands, to scout bands. It hasn't really been that path for me for years.
I'd be curious to hear from both of you guys as far as the music, the product. Have you noticed, a shift in what people are putting out and the thoughtfulness behind it?
I think that some folks who write pretty quickly and want to chronicle this time of being in quarantine and how that's affected their emotional state and their songwriting, have been able to write and record albums pretty quickly that do sound different than their previous work, or even what their live set would sound like. And then there are a few artists that I work with who are just not feeling rushed at all about going into a studio and recording an album or anything like that, are really using this time to kind of cocoon or just catch up with themselves, and aren't feeling that pressure to create right now in this weird time. And yeah, some, it's the other end of the spectrum, people that are writing a second album now, and and are just let's try to release this one before we can tour two. We can tour on 2 albums next year,
Yeah.
And it's it really kind of reflects just how different artists can be.
Yeah.
I think there's a common thread with the people that I'm recording in this time frame, and it's a bit of a bewilderment. But they all have the same thing, and it might sound cheesy or a cliche, but they say it in a different way. But it's like, what if we put out something right now that's so awesome it helps somebody get through the most bleak of breaking moments? It's like how can we put something out that, even if it changes one person's life for an hour in a massive 180 degrees at the right moment, I'm seeing the band say things like that. And so and it's kind of an unspoken thing, you know. If I was dedicated to the craft of record production before, now is the time to push inward, push on myself harder, because I cannot be a part of a paper trail that I didn't bring it. I got to bring it, because I cannot have a group or an artist come through the studio and almost do it. I can't send them back home with that in their being. It's like, this is not the time to let people down, those relationships.
That's amazing.
Tony, did you feel like there was some hesitancy to release albums during this period, or was it kind of like, this is what we have to do, continue on type of situation?
For sure. No, I mean, like, we did a lot of sort of soul searching and trying to figure out what to do, what our plan was. And, you know, we worked pretty closely with our distributor. And, you know, back in March of last year, when all these record stores in Europe were closing, you know, everyone was going into lockdown. They were like, hey, if you have any projects, you know, in production right now, and you're able to like scale them back to like 15 or, you know, 20% of your planned production run, like, that's what we suggest, you know, now's the time to do that. And so we're like, oh, okay, yeah, let's do that. I mean, if you folks have been doing this a lot longer than we have, so sure, we'll take your advice. And we did see that in March and April when we were getting our sales reports, you know, like our sales to stores like just took a huge hit. Like, our March sales were about a third of what they usually are in stores. And so we were like, man, this is going to be bleak, you know. And through the grapevine, you know, we kind of heard that all these bigger indie labels and major labels were just pushing everything out, you know, like they were just postponing all of their major releases until later in the year. You know, as 2020 went on, it kind of became like, you know, we're pushing this major release to 2021. But in that sort of, you know, as the year kind of went on, we realized that there were, you know, other ways to do things. And I kind of think that all those labels pushing these big releases back kind of left a bit of a vacuum in terms of press, and like being able to like kind of break through the noise and get some meaningful press for new artists and smaller artists. And we saw that firsthand, you know, like we had one album specifically where, you know, we talked to the artist and we just decided to stay the course. They had a release date of June 5th, 2020. And for a couple of different reasons, we were like, all right, let's just do this. Let's see how it goes, you know? And that record specifically, kind of what, you know, Frenchie was talking about with the artists that he's working with, like, people came out of the woodwork to tell, like, writers wrote that in their reviews, but like fans were like writing the band saying, hey, this album is really helping me right now, you know? And that was just amazing, like, to, you know, hear it directly from people and kind of just see by the quality of the writing about the record and just like the amount of press that it got was really inspiring. And I think that record really allowed me to be open to, we work with Will Johnson here in Austin. And, he said, hey, I've got some songs that I've been working on for a while. I've got some new songs. I just want to go into the studio for 3 days and record like a really, quiet record. Would you want to put that out? And I was like, yeah, absolutely. Let's do it. And that was like the sort of the second time where that was just like people needed that, and they really responded to it immediately. It's cool. Yeah.
Really cool.
So there have been a couple different, we've really taken it, on a release by release basis in terms of like figuring out what makes sense. We definitely pushed a bunch of stuff back, but those were records where we decided to kind of see what happened.
Well, and do you think that the way that you've had to release records now, sort of, I'm sure that you've had to really tap your creativity and look for different outlets, resources, Bandcamp type things to use. Do you think that will inform how you do it, post-pandemic?
Yeah. I mean, I think everyone has just been forced to be more creative about everything. And I do think, especially for bigger bands, like I think live streams are going to stick around after touring starts. Especially these sort of high quality ones, multi-camera angles, like pro audio, where like maybe a band, or, a fan that lives in like another country that bands never come to, or that's like kind of the upside of the internet, is that some kid in Africa can like discover a band and become a huge fan. Like all these DSPs are expanding into like dozens and dozens of new countries, and it's cool seeing like where the plays are coming from, what countries like folks are actually listening. And so yeah, I think like things like that, done well, are going to remain part of like a album release strategy. But if anything, it's just like, I think just doing things with intention and like making it like an authentic experience, like that's the stuff that kind of cuts through the noise. Like any band can go on IG Live and like play some songs to their iPhone at any time. And I think 3 or 4 months into the pandemic, everyone sort of got their fill.
Some artists during the pandemic, I saw, one in particular, who I think got really creative and did a really good job of staying present. And that's Phoebe Bridgers. And, she had a record that she was putting out, which obviously she probably couldn't put on hold, but, all of her late night talk show appearances, and she was just like, everything she did was a huge production to a certain extent, even though it was like a minimal production. It was huge in the way that she approached it, creatively, which I think, may weed out some artists, during this time. I don't know. I feel like that, at the end of this all, that the artists that come out the end ahead are the ones that have made those adjustments and kind of diversified their approach to putting their product out, or delivering what they're doing, whether it be live stream or recorded. So I think it's going to be real interesting to see what comes out at the end of this.
But I think Tony mentioned something earlier. It's like it really is the $5 word of the day, and being intentional. And it's one thing for bands or an artist, to feel the pressure to go create content, all this stuff. Content is right. It's like it's you drawing a stick figure of your mom and for Mother's Day. Like songs, master recordings are not content. That's the shit. That's property. And but the bands and the artists that can be intentional and a bit objective and look at who they are Like, why are we this entity? Do we want to touch people? Are we really like, or we just want to be in our incubator and be indie as hell and super alternative and not really give a shit about touching people? Do we want to mine this web thing and find out who our people are? And it's not cheesy or a pose. It's just like, well, who are we? Because we have questions about who we are. There's probably a lot of people that feel the same shit. Well, let's just put it out there. Let's just communicate with them, but with intention and that kind of soul searching. More of Tony's quotes, it bands have the ones that are kind of pushing through that other dimension and the watching, staying in tune with your favorite group on your iPhone or whatever, on social media. It's like, okay, this is what it's come down to. But the ones that are cutting through have somehow stepped back and they've got some omniscient view of what they are, and they've figured out how to drive that a bit and sort of expose some not always slick parts of themselves. I've tuned in, I don't want to sell anybody out, but I've tuned into many videos or like, okay, I'm going live at this time, and then you ask me your questions and it just goes horribly wrong. And then, but they stay in and it gets worse and worse and worse. And they're like, okay, finally, I've had enough. I'm really feeling this. I'll be back tomorrow. And those are some of my favorite moments. But I just see people trying, and I mean, I don't want to deflate rock stars. I mean, the mythological status of the rock star is what probably made me want to be in music in the first place. Like Van Halen didn't have to do their homework. My teachers could suck my toe. I didn't want to do their homework. I wanted to think about Van Halen. But to fast forward, anyway, it's the humanization of these musicians where they kind of put it out on the line and do it with some authenticity. Like, they've obviously policed, who am I? What do I stand for? Why do I make music? And why do I get up on stage and demand to have lights put on me and say, listen to my songs, watch me play? And they've kind of taken that inward look. They're doing some pretty compelling things on the internet, and it's not just content. It's like, it's new memories and it's new art.
One of the things that we're trying to do here is kind of bring awareness to, the situation and the organizations that are out there, kind of, helping everyone get through, this time, whether it be, SIMS, whether it be Red River Cultural District, whether it be National Independent Venue Association, HAAM. And I know you guys, there's, artists in Austin, the affordability is tough, and this definitely didn't help the situation at all for them. Are there any specific organizations that you guys, are familiar with or recommend that maybe we should bring attention to or haven't mentioned?
I'm more of a fan, but I do collaborate with them on some sound recordings, but with Austin Music Foundation.
Oh, yeah.
And Austin Music Foundation is not for every solo artist or every band. I mean, if you've already played Saturday Night Live, it's probably not exactly an entity that you need to reach out to. If your last tour was with 3 tour buses, it's not for you. But there's a handful of people that you can select on their website to do a consultation with, and depending on who you reach out to, that solo artist, that group, the only bad question in that consultation is the one you don't ask. So I mean, something for me as a musician, ages ago, somebody said, well, you don't want to sign with this label because they don't pay publishing, and I'm like, well, what does that mean? And it was so I mean, they're just such elementary words, and you can Google these things now, which is quite amazing. You don't have to have a law degree to understand all the properties of royalties. But it just being able to have a consultation and share music with Austin Music Foundation, and just talk to someone like, hey, this is what I'm doing. Here's some of my output. This is what I'm working on. Just a non-bias kind of soundboard. It's a precious commodity, and maybe it's not for everyone. Maybe some people are a little bit more private, but it is. I'm seeing people do this type of thing, or I'm even sending groups to them because they have questions. Should we get a publicist? How should we brand ourselves? And it's like, well, maybe it's not this giant kind of concept. Let's kind of take it a little more, let's do a little more soul searching. Maybe it's a little simpler than you think. And so just bands or artists are getting a bit intimidated and they don't know how to move forward. This is just another entity you could talk to, but they're not a music publisher. They're not a venue. They are not a music manager. They're not a record producer. So, they're not going to rat you out with the rest of the people in the gang that you didn't know how things worked. It's private, and that anonymity is something that it's hard for musicians to say, hey, it's me. I don't know what's going on. So breathe in. None of us know what's going on. Cool. I'm there. That's me, Frenchie Smith. I don't know what the fuck's going on. Am I doing things I like? Yes. Am I spending time around people I believe in? Yes. Am I busting my fucking balls to make it sound fucking badass? Goddamn right I am. That's all I know.
You kind of touched on something when we were talking on the phone the other day, and I don't know if we want to expand on this, but I'm not saying that you're new to the Austin music scene, but new-ish compared to some people. And you had a perspective as far as like, what the industry and the environment is in Austin, and how maybe it could be a little bit more unified and maybe less, club, heavy or live music heavy. And if it's something you don't want to discuss right now, we don't have to.
You want me to talk some
don't
shit
wanna-
on the Zoom call. I see.
No, not at all. No. I think there's room for improvement all the time.
Well, yeah. I mean, so I wouldn't say I'm like new to the Austin music scene. Like I moved here in 2000, and I saw Frenchie's band on that public access show that used to have like live, Austin bands play. I forget what it was called.
Capsize.
Capsize.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I went to, there was a period of my life, 21, 22, where I was going to emos like 3 or 4 nights a week, pissing on the ice in the trough.
Oh.
And just seeing any, this was like 2002, 2003, 2004, and just like looking at, the emos ad in the Chronicle and just being like, oh, I've heard that band name before. I'm going to go to that show, like not looking them up on the internet, not listening to their music on Spotify beforehand, just going to shows because I was genuinely curious about music. And yeah, I mean, so yeah, the label is relatively new. We started the label in 2014, and I was in bands from like 2004 to up until a few years ago, and toured a bunch. Played like hundreds of shows in the U.S. and Canada and Europe, and I kind of keep coming back to Austin, and I love what Austin has been, up until a certain point. But yeah, I mean, as much as Austin wants to
be the
pretend,
live music capital of the world.
Sure, I mean, it's the live music capital of the world. That's great.
Yeah.
I don't.
But it can be more.
I don't think musicians in Austin can build a career out of playing at bars. I think it's a very one-dimensional music career, and musicians in other cities have multiple revenue streams. And sure, like touring dried up for everybody, overnight, but there are other cities and other ecosystems that, put a lot of work and time into like developing like a digital strategy and, figuring out like the sync licensing world and figuring out how to sell physical, records and physical merch and stuff too. And, the sort of one of the Austin phenomenons that breaks my heart is when a band sends me a really great record, and I listen to it, I like it. We're not really able to help out on it. We're not able to put it out. And then a month later, I see them release it on Bandcamp. And that's it, like and they play an album release show at a bar to coincide with the Bandcamp release. And it's just like, some of those strategies seem really short-sighted to me. If you've gone into a studio and you've taken the time, first of all, you've written all these songs, you've played them with your band, you've gotten them to a point where you're ready to go into the studio. And then to just sort of throw it out there like that, without sort of a strategy and without like, that word intention again, it's just kind of heartbreaking to watch, honestly, because they're amazing bands in Austin. And, I think one element of it is sort of a weird inferiority complex, because we don't have the infrastructure that, New York or LA or Chicago or Nashville has. But yeah, it was like when they opened a BMI office here a couple of years ago, people talked about that being this big, lift for the Austin music industry. And it's like, I don't know any musicians whose lives were like affected by them opening a BMI office in town,
Yeah. No, I agree with you. I mean, I've been in Austin since '91, and in the music scene, in either as a fan or working with bands in one way or the other. And I've seen a lot of talented people that it's just they're playing the same shows, they're doing the same thing, and I agree with you completely, and that's kind of why I brought it up. I wasn't trying to put you in a position where you're.
No, it's funny because I will talk about it whenever anyone asks me about. Like I'm very like, I think a lot of people in Austin want to kind of beat around the bush about it. Like people at the Austin Chronicle Music Awards aren't going to talk about the fact that we don't have a real music industry here. I mean, the music awards show is trying to give the impression that we have a music industry here, and we have a venue industry, and we have some great studios, but like in terms of like a fully fleshed out music industry, it doesn't exist. When an Austin band gets big, they sign with a record label in another state,
And a lot of times they record in a recording studio in another state. So yeah, I think yeah, I Tony, where did you live in early 90s? Where did you live?
Well, I was still in high school. Well, the early 90s. Early 90s, I was in elementary school.
Badass.
I mean,
well,
yeah.
I could have been the reason. Yeah, I could have. They could have called Child Protective Services on me if I would have taken you to some shows. I had dreadlocks and super grunge, man. It was like there were a million tiny cool labels in Austin in like 90, 91, 92, 93, and then poof. And then, but the studio side of it was like, there was like, it was just like this massive gap. It's like the recording studio is like, we've got two sounds. But no, I'm sorry, three. Willie Nelson, Stevie Ray Vaughan, or Fabulous Thunderbirds. I mean, it was, or if the recording studio had like a hipper sound, it was like the Spin Doctors. So it's like those were your sounds that you got. And then we had all these really amazing record labels. 16 Deluxe were signed to Trance Syndicate, owned by King Coffee. He's like, he was my A&R man. We were distributed through Touch and Go. I mean, it was like, wow, this is so amazing. And then I was like, okay, all right, we've got the labels. Let's get the studio side of it more awesome, where at least there'll be someone that has a key to a recording studio that understands it's okay for the finished record to sound broken, and that's correct. You know, like that Jesus Lizard's bass tone is an okay thing. You know, it's like, I've got this. I'm going to do it. I've got dreams. So anyway, so we got the studio side of it, and then just like the label part of it kind of started drifting. But right, it's like it's trying to get the perfect blend of ingredients for a French press coffee. All right, the grounds are just right. I've got enough coffee in there, the temperature of the water. But anyway, I'm just like, seriously, like I could anyone that's is putting out records in Austin, and with that a little bit of that vacuum that we have, or that void of music industry that we have, people putting out records are just kind of godly to me. And by the time, if you know, Tony, you keep doing what you're doing, and there's other like-minded people that are inspired by you, they're not thinking about, you know, the Keeled Scales label as like their competition. It's like, no, it's a fucked up cousin. When one entity does well, the whole thing does well. And I think when Michael, you're talking about clicks, it's like the size of the business that any of us are doing is so small. I could just speak for myself. It's such a, you know, just grassroots, you know, embarrassing level of income, that having attitude for such a small business is it's just childish. And I know I'm immature, but but the thing that will enhance music industry out of our city is really other people being excited to seeing each other kind of lift up. It's like, this is a great publicity company. It's a great you know, sync license company, labels, bands, producers, studios, all those types of things, like poster makers, t-shirt makers, band merch, one shop, you know, one-stop shop kind of entities, seeing all that, booking agents, promoters, all those types of things happening with some types of sustainability. You know, but the lack of infrastructure, you know, we're kind of we're it's like Texas Energy. We need someone else to pipe it in, and that's a bummer. You know, we have the creative minds, and kind of a fuck you, we're going to do it regardless kind of attitude as a culture. It's a little, so I'd like to see Austin catch up and somehow use Austin's spirit of like basically not knowing the rules, therefore screwing up the rules, and maybe succeed at this whole new level of invention and operating in a new future of the music industry. I would love to see that. Is anybody, am I speaking in circles again? Sorry, guys.
Oh, no, totally makes sense. Well, so Tony, would you say that your label is there an intentional where your plan where you're trying to find a solution to the problem that you so describe?
I mean, yeah, that's good to put me on the spot about, like, I mean, do I have solutions?
Can you fix the entire Austin music business?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of what established the Austin music scene, the live music capital of the world, is how cheap and how weird it was in the 70s and 80s and 90s, you know? And now that Austin's going the way of like San Francisco and Seattle and becoming this like tech town that's just like, you know, becoming more and more prohibitively expensive for artists to live in. I don't think you're going to see this sort of scrappy creativity to the same degree that we had 10 years ago, you know? I think it's like there's some cool stuff going on out in Lockhart, you know, just like true artists, weirdos, like doing cool stuff, you know, and they don't have to work 50 hours a week, you know, in the service industry to like be able to make music on the side, you know.
Yeah.
So I think like, you know, that's why you see these like weird small college towns, you know, Athens, Georgia, you know, Austin, Texas back in the day, where there was this huge burst of creativity because like, you know, 5 or 6 people could live in a house together and play in each other's bands and, you know, make records. And now it's like, it's just a hustle to like pay your rent.
Right.
I mean, I think there are some like really basic steps that can happen to like, to kind of grow the Austin community and grow like bands in Austin. And a big part of that is just like, you know, not playing Austin too much when shows do come back. I mean, that's sort of been the blessing and the curse for a lot of bands, is just oversaturating themselves.
Yeah.
And in turn that like devalues their music. You know, if you know that you can see a band play 4 or 5 times in a given month, it becomes really easy to say, well, I'll see them next time, you know, when you're like, I know these are like past emotions. Like I think everyone would die to go to a show right now of any kind.
Yeah.
But yeah, in the past, you know, it's like Thursday night, you're like, man, I want to go see my friend's band, but I gotta work, you know, I gotta get up early tomorrow. I'll see them next week, or, you know.
Yeah.
But that's a phenomenon because there are so many opportunities for bands to play shows here. I saw that stuff happen all the time, you know, like bands
Yeah.
playing 2 or 3 nights in a row, not even promoting 2 of those shows, you know. I think, you know, being more strategic about like what they're saying yes to, and getting out of town every once in a while. Like, I mean, was it San Antonio, Dallas, and Houston are like 3 of the 10 biggest cities in the country, and there's not a ton of bands that, you know, from Austin that get to those other markets and actually build an audience in those places, you know.
Yeah.
Just simple steps like that, you know. Going on a West Coast tour or East Coast tour is huge for, you know, establishing your band and building an audience, but like there are huge audiences much closer by, you know, that you could be playing like on the weekends. And I just don't see that happen often with Austin bands.
Mm-hmm.
Well, guys, we ran kind of long, but we appreciate the conversation. It was very informative and entertaining.
I have a quick question for
yeah.
Frenchie. Frenchie, years before the pandemic, how did you have the crystal ball to know that you should call your studio the Bubble? I mean,
right.
it's
I
amazing.
mean, I've actually kind of thought about that, and the idea, the original idea was basically, it was taken from a lyric from a song I wrote. But the idea was, when we all meet at this place and we go in the bubble, we're safe. You know, creativity rules supremely, and the idea was like, it was like, we're really going to try. You know, so you're safe in here. Your music is safe in here, and you're safe to speak. You're safe to be yourself. And now, you know, that same thing is kind of going down, and you know, geez, you know, I'm mixing 8 songs in a day. I think they sound quite good. So you know, I'm upping my game with what people's budgets are, and kind of looking at the vase, and if it's a third full, I'm just happy that there is a vase, you know, a vase, and just trying to mine every bit of my creativity to have the music continue to work in that mythological, you know, agenda, as well as the physical safety and the physical health, you know, that we share in that same environment. And so, like, the name still kind of applies. It just took on a meaning with a lot more gravity. Yeah. And no one's come to the studio and gotten sick. You know, I mean, it's I'm not going to bore everyone of the cleaning I do in there, but like, I have every inch of that building, and it's a large building, memorized, and every bit of it gets cleaned.
And you laser it. Just through the fucking lasers.
And then we're not even having drinks and food in the studio. It's like, let's go outside to the picnic table, do that, because you can't put a mask on a piece of pizza. It's like, if the health officials tell us wearing a mask is preventative, why stop there? It's really half-assed. Like what about some 12 Topo Chico bottles just with people's mouths on them, just in the environment? Like,
Right.
screw it. Let's go to the next level and just have all of our excited mouth biting, drinking things happen outside. And it might seem kind of extreme to people, but all of a sudden when one singer it has finished their vocal performances and they go, okay, I'm ready, and I'm done, I'm really happy with what I did, and then the next band member goes, oh, can I harmonize to that? And I said, yes, give me a second. Then I break out a different headphone box for their mixing, a different set of headphones, a different microphone. They're like, wait a second, all right, now we get it, thanks buddy, thanks.
Yeah.
And that extra step took 3 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
Well, cool, guys. We
Yeah.
appreciate you joining us. Paul, did you have something else? Or?
No, I just want to say thanks, you guys, for
Yeah.
what you guys have done. Just all the joy that the music that you put out, and that you guys create. It's so important to me and to the people that I know and love. And so, big shout out to you guys, for that and for keeping it going during this really, really tough time. So
Yeah,
you're
and
doing
glad
the
you
good
guys
work.
are doing well.
And I think I would just say to anybody that's watching this video, really appeal to you. It would mean the world to us. If you've made it this far into the video, please go check out what Keeled Scales are doing. Go, if you haven't followed them on Instagram, check it out. The same with Bubble Recording, and just there's a lot of like really random moments captured on Chris Frenchie Smith Instagram. It's completely just raw, and there's no pose in it. Like, people just put the most random things on there, and if you find something that's remotely engaging on Keeled Scales on and their Spotify or any of their groups, and you find yourself adding that to your favorite Spotify playlist, and you've listened to that song 20 times and it made you happier, just look at your human spirit if you can, and consider buying that record. And the same thing with the groups at the Bubble, the label and a recording studio. We're just a vehicle for you to find your new heroes. And thanks for going that extra mile when you can.
Great message.
Yeah, well said.
Yeah, man, and Tony's lighting was perfect for that little fade out. He's got this nice little angelic glow behind him now.
It's my kitchen window coming through.
All right, thanks again, guys.
Yeah, thank you.
Guys.
Yeah,
Appreciate y'all.
yeah. Take
Right.
care.
Take care. Bye.
Bye.
There's a man